A lioness walks into a clearing in Kenya's Samburu National Reserve. She's alone, separated from her pride, and she's hungry. And then she finds an oryx calf, a baby antelope, the exact kind of animal she would normally kill within seconds. And she doesn't. She walks beside it. She sleeps next to it. For days, she guards it from other predators, including other lions, including males from her own species who try to take it. The locals named her Kamunyak. It means blessed one. And the question that nobody could cleanly answer was whether what she was doing had a name at all. Interspecies friendships have been documented for long enough now that scientists can't simply wave them away. For a while, the explanation was captivity. Strip away the pressures of the wild, put two animals in the same enclosure, and of course they'll tolerate each other, maybe bond a little. But that doesn't explain Kamunyak. She was wild, she was hungry. She chose, repeatedly and at personal cost, to stay with that calf. Behavioral scientists who watched it described it as one of the most confounding field observations they'd recorded in decades. They didn't have clean language for it. What do you call a predator that mothers its prey? The biology of bonding across species isn't as mysterious as it once seemed. When animals engage in positive physical contact, grooming, resting together, playing, their brains release oxytocin, the same hormone that drives maternal attachment, the same one that fires when you hold someone you love. Oxytocin doesn't check species membership before it releases. It responds to proximity and safety and repeated positive contact. What this means is that the neurochemical infrastructure for bonding is broad enough to extend well beyond the boundaries evolution originally drew for it. The hardware doesn't always care about the intended software. Owen was a baby hippo when the 2004 tsunami hit the Kenyan coast and took his entire pod. He was pulled from the ocean and brought to a wildlife sanctuary, traumatized and alone. Hippos are among the most socially dependent large mammals on Earth. Without a group, without that constant physical closeness, they don't just get lonely, they deteriorate. And Owen found Mzee, a 130-year-old Aldabra giant tortoise. He followed Mzee across the sanctuary. He slept pressed against him. He ate beside him. Mzee, for his part, eventually stopped moving away. Sanctuary staff watched it happen and described it with the same careful hesitation researchers always use when the data surprises them. There is no ecological relationship between hippos and giant tortoises. There's no evolutionary reason for either species to recognize the other as a social partner. And yet Owen needed something, and Mzee was there, and something formed between them that held for years. The question researchers keep circling back to is whether these bonds require something like emotional recognition. Can an animal actually perceive distress or loneliness in a completely different species? There's evidence that suggests yes, and it's harder to dismiss than most people expect. During 2012, a team of scientists from the University of London documented that dogs approached crying strangers with submissive, low body postures, not their owners, anyone crying. The behavioral signature was consistent with what scientists call an empathic response. The dog wasn't just reacting to something unusual, it was reacting to something sad. And if a dog can read emotional pain in a human stranger, the distance between that and reading it in a different species entirely starts to look much shorter. Cheetahs raised at wildlife conservation centers alongside domestic dogs offer a case that sits right at the intersection of therapy and biology. Cheetahs in captivity are prone to anxiety. They're high-strung in ways that make socialization difficult and public education programs nearly impossible. Dogs, statistically, are not. What researchers found was that when cheetah cubs were paired with confident, calm dogs from an early age, the cheetahs adopted behavioral cues from them. They watched how the dog moved through new environments. They took something from the dog's ease. The effect was measurable and repeatable. One animal's nervous system, in some functional sense, helped regulate another's. And these weren't animals with shared evolutionary history or overlapping communication systems. They were, in the wild, not particularly relevant to each other at all. Koko the gorilla learned over 1,000 signs in American Sign Language over the course of her lifetime. She used them to ask for things she wanted. One of those things, repeatedly and specifically, was a cat. When she was finally given 2 kittens named Smokey and Lipstick, small enough to sit in her palm, Her caregivers described the change in her as immediate. She groomed them. She held them against herself with the same posture she used for her own stuffed animals, which she treated with conspicuous tenderness. When one of her earlier cats died, Koko signed words associated with sadness. Whether that constitutes grief in the way you experience grief is a question nobody can settle. But something happened inside that gorilla that produced behavior indistinguishable from mourning, and then given the chance to attach again, she did. Themba the elephant was 6 months old when he lost his mother in a South African nature reserve. The herd didn't take him in. For elephant calves, that age and that loss together are usually fatal, not from starvation alone, but from the collapse of social structure that development requires. The staff at Shamwari Wildlife Rehabilitation Center introduced a sheep named Albert. It took a week before Themba stopped treating Albert as something to investigate and started treating him as something to stay near. After that, they were inseparable. They foraged together. They slept together. Albert, an animal with no apparent capacity to understand what an elephant is grieving, nonetheless became the object around which Themba organized his entire social world. Sanctuaries across the world have since adopted interspecies pairing as a documented therapeutic strategy for orphaned animals. The Themba and Albert pairing is part of why. Zebras and ostriches share open grassland in ways that look, at first glance, like simple coexistence. But what researchers have documented between them is closer to active coordination. Zebras carry exceptional hearing and a strong sense of smell. Ostriches have some of the sharpest long-range vision of any land animal. Alone, each species has significant sensory gaps. Together, those gaps close. They've been observed responding to each other's alarm signals, moving in directions neither might have chosen independently. This isn't friendship in any warm sense. But it's a relationship built on mutual recognition of what the other animal perceives, which means each species has developed enough cross-species awareness to trust the other's reactions as information. That's not nothing. That's a form of social intelligence running between two animals that share almost no other behavioral overlap. What's strange about all of these cases taken together is how often they involve loss as the starting condition. Owen lost his pod. Themba lost his mother. Kamignac had been separated from her pride. Koko had lost a companion. It's possible that's a coincidence of documentation, that we simply notice these bonds more when they form around visible need. But it's also possible that loss strips away the behavioral defaults that ordinarily keep species separated. That when the usual structures of belonging are gone, something more flexible underneath them surfaces, something that was always there, able to reach across species lines, waiting for a reason to.